So this will be yet another O235 engine replaced by Viking in the Zenith 650 with the 140 turbo. This is actually a high performance Lycoming with the aftermarket fuel injection and ignition systems to make the old air-cooled as modern as possible, but still not good enough. We leveled and weighed the airplane, and it was 916 pounds. It was 40 pounds heavier than the book. Even hanging on the tail wasn't enough to be able to push it down to the ground. First step, of course, is to organize everything, remove all the old, and prep the firewall for the new engine. Next is to verify the safety of the existing airplane, and we did find quite a few things. It's a good airplane, a good build, but still some unsafe things. And then the engine was installed to the firewall. Alright, so this area right in here above the alternator, we kind of tie that in low, and everything kind of goes like right here. The harness does go here, but in any case it needs to stay fairly low because eventually the intercooler system is going to go above that, so we don't want like things coming way up in the air here. This shouldn't be any problem. So that's how it's all tucked in, to plan for that, and also keeping this area right here open for the intercooler area. We also added the remote oil pressure hose, and had to crack that open, bleed it to get pressure, and it comes from down in here. Sometimes the new Dynon sensors, if they're approved for vibration, if they don't care, then it can go right in the engine. Let's get a little review behind the intercooler before it goes on. So what we've got is the dual throttle. So it comes down here. It's behind the intercooler. So we got to hold the intercooler up here and make sure this is far enough back. It comes down to here. And then the other one goes underneath the engine, comes from the other side of the firewall, and comes underneath. We tie it right here, and so that gives you the dual throttle. Okay, make sure it clears all this stuff here, and make sure it clears everything behind there. When you're done, tie everything back. You don't want anything to get caught. The heater back here comes in here. That's the return from the heater. And then we have a silicone hose on the other one, high temperature hose, goes to the heater, and it goes clear over to the turbocharger, and we'll talk about that more later. All right, this airplane already had a aftermarket fuel injection system for a Lycoming, so builder was okay with retaining that fuel pump system because he never had a problem with it. So we have now brought that hose to the baby turbo engine. All right, and then so that's obviously the output, high pressure side. And then we brought the other one over to the other side, and there's a fuel regulator over there. We set it between 40 and 50 psi, and there's a return line there going back to the tanks. And we'll talk about that afterwards. I just want to cover the stuff that's behind the intercooler here. Okay, so if you want to work behind here, tidy up, whatever, the easiest way to do it is to take the intake manifold off. It's such an easy thing to do on this airplane or this engine. So now, make sure your O-rings are in. I'm going to install it now, just to kind of show the reverse procedure. And obviously when you take it off, it's the other way around. So you get an extension, then you can do the screws for this very easily. So the first thing you'll do, obviously, to take it off is you take these out. And then you also would loosen up this one and this one, these two clamps. And these you always want to put a little drop of oil when you tighten them back up. We removed the stainless hardware and we use some different hardware because they seize. So you want to tighten it and then look on the back side so you only have a couple of threads left. That makes it loose enough that you can rotate it. And the point of loosening, at least this one you can kind of leave alone, is that you can rotate the manifold like this now away from the engine once you get these out. There's one more thing. I'm showing you this because it's so easy to do and you don't actually have to remove the manifold, you're just going to tilt it out. There's one more thing that keeps you from doing that, and that's the harness that's up here. But it's super easy to remove. Just cut all the little tie wraps, make sure you're obviously very careful with the wires. And then when you reinstall it, be gentle with all the connectors. Every connector might have a little push thing here, make sure that's in. Little lock for the pins, and then it has a lock here. Now when you put it in, you don't have to pull this lock out and bend it. You're just going to very carefully align the connector, make sure it wants to go in place, and then there's a clip, and then push the lock in like that. And the same with the fuel pump. It has a red lock on this side. Listen for the click, and then lock it. And the same with the map sensor. You know, make sure the connectors are perfectly straight like that when you put them on. Push it in and lock. So obviously to remove it, unlock and then push, and then you can take it off. And this one is unlock and then past it on the inside here, not the red piece, but inside here you push and you pull. And then there's going to be one tie wrap like right there. And then torque these 10mm bolts to 120 inch-pounds. And if you're ever working on this engine, there are a lot of these little bolts here, and those are 60 inch-pounds. They're 5mm. And that's it. And then of course you have to now go back and tighten this up and tighten this up, and you're done. This engine and airplane did end up with a VIP propeller, and I will cover that in a separate video. Here you see the sticker where you can determine the year of the engine. So this installation was a little bit different. Let's just cover it. It already had a couple of fuel pumps and filters and return lines and everything already done, because the Lycoming was also fuel injected with an automotive fuel injection system. So there are return lines that go out here, and feed lines obviously here, and pumps, filters in there, and then a pump system right out here on the firewall. It's on the opposite side of the turbocharger system, so it's a little bit cooler here, and we're going to have louvers in the cowling and so forth. So it worked with the Lycoming. It's the same type of system, other than that there's a regulator here that set the pressure here, and this then returns to the 6-port valve and then back to the tanks. So it's the kind of system that we even used many years ago, and it works fine. You're not going to tear it all out. It produces the 3 bars that we need for the engine, so the owner wanted to keep it, and there it is. And we also kept the electrical system on this airplane. It has a single battery, but it's a huge battery, and it's behind the seats here. So we just kept that too, and he was okay with it. Basically just asked him what he wants to do, and so it's a little different than what we normally do, but it's a big battery there. I would suggest replacing the contactor yearly, because the contactor can fail. The batteries are less likely to fail, but the contactor can fail. So I just wrote that right there. Probably could run them in parallel too, and just to have some security that you always have power on to everything. All right, so that's the difference between this and what we normally do. We normally do a little header tank and pumps in there and dual batteries and all that. Other than that, engine's mounted the same way. It's on the firewall and mounted here, and then it has the bottom mount, and it goes out here. So that's easy. Now these tubes, looks like, this firewall is not always perfect, so we keep these tubes about 1/4 inch too long. You can just fit them in. If they need to be trimmed back just a little bit to get the engine level with the longeron here, use a smart level here and on a flat surface on the gearbox, or 90 degrees to this, and then set it level, set the engine level to minus like 1/2 degree down, and then that takes care of the actual mounting of the engine. Other than that, you're going to get a complete engine. You have to finish up the intercooler mounting. So there's some tubing here that's been shown in other videos. There's a 45 here. You're going to be pushing your intercooler in here. Don't use any kind of silicone grease or anything here. You want that not to slip out on you. But you can use soap and water basically to make it slide in and out easier. Then that'll dry up. These screws we've changed with steel screws instead of stainless, and we put a little bit of grease or a drop of oil on the threads. Intercooler is mounted here with a stainless steel clamp, and then it is mounted here, and it's mounted here, and then it has support with the cowling. This is temporary. I just flew the airplane without a cowling. It's my first flights usually like that, and then that worked out fine. Of course, this will be part of the cowling when it's done. This airplane also had a dynon system and had a bunch of EGTs and CHTs for the Lycoming. So we reused one of the EGT probes here, drilled a hole, and we reused one over here. So that just is still wired to the dynon, just has to be told that it's no longer EGT. It is turbocharger outlet temperature and engine inlet temperature. So basically before the intercooler and after the intercooler. That'll tell you if the turbocharger is performing the way it's supposed to. It should be less than 350 Fahrenheit. And then into the engine should be less than 150 Fahrenheit. We hooked up the map sensor that was already at the dynon here. Now I found by putting it ahead of the butterfly valve, you don't get the actual pressure. You only see as soon as you start making boost. So we tapped the hole here and we put it there. So now we can read the manifold pressure at any RPM. The dynon did have inputs for some a gearbox probe and coolant probe. So that's already been taken care of as well. Now, the cooling has been a challenge on this little engine because it can produce a huge amount of power at 60 inches of manifold pressure, and the amount of cooling required when you drop it to like 50 inches or 45 inches drastically reduces. But in order to have the maximum power available in climb as high as you want to go, which is the point of a turbocharged engine, I did two things. One, I just threw on this angle here to trip the air going over the cooler, and they made an enormous difference. So that drops it a lot. And then I cut my cooling shroud, and we're going to start providing them now with a taper. So the back of especially in this 650 here, seems like the radiator is almost at the wrong angle compared to the flying of the airplane. As you can see, the belly kind of comes up here. So if it's flat with that, it's almost angled into the air a little bit. So we are going to do cooling scoops. We'll change them, and anyone can change theirs if they want to. You don't have to drain the cooling or anything. You just take out the screws, drill out the rivets, make sure you don't drill into the radiator, and then put new sides on where you tilt the back up and a new back piece, and that makes for a nice see how shallow it is in the back there, and then tall in the front. So between that and this, huge difference on the cooling, and I can now sustain, climb as much as I want with the nose up and full power on an incredibly hot day here in Florida today. So that's really the only thing that's kind of different with this installation to any other we have done, and including our own airplane. Any kind of new things or upgrades or whatever, like this is a critical hose, so we keep improving on what kind of material we use on this hose. We now pre-make these hoses for people with the Whittaker clamps already installed. There's an aluminum piece there with a barb, and there's one there with a barb. And so that's the best hose we've had there. That's just low pressure or low gravity feed back to the engine, but it is extremely hot because it comes off the turbocharger after lubricating and cooling the turbocharger. And some of that oil will, you know, kind of sit in here a little bit before it finds its way to the engine. So it needs to be extremely tight and be able to take the temperature. So that's a nice improvement if you don't have this kind of a hose. The other thing, exhaust. Yeah, sometimes you're gonna, depending on where the exhaust pipe goes, you might be able to use just one of these screws. It doesn't matter, you don't need both, but this is really just to support the clamp from vibration. So whatever it takes to get it, you know, out here from all those holes you can choose. This is a stainless piece that runs really close to the exhaust. All these other ones are aluminum. This engine will also have a thermostat eventually. It won't be here, but we are going to machine a little holder for a thermostat that sits in here. Right now there's no thermostat, but it'll be one available that'll sit behind here. The other thing about this installation was that a lot of it was a lot of work to install it, don't get me wrong, but some of it just kind of happened to be similar to that Lycoming in the sense that the Lycoming had a lightweight, you know, aftermarket starter on it, so the cabling for that also worked for this. It happened to have a Nip and Denso lightweight alternator, which happened to have the same plug that worked for this. So that was kind of cool to, you know, see how few or how many of the connections would just kind of move over to this engine without having to redo all that, which is kind of nice. This is a O2 that's not really used by the ECU, but the owner can read it on his dynon, and he has some kind of other thing too that he can read the oxygen sensor. So we put one in so he can just see what the air-fuel ratio is. All right, well that's really it. I mean, you know, watch all, if you're installing a baby turbo, watch all the videos and you'll see, you know, like small like nuggets of information here and there. Like this one has a few like upgrades and stuff, or things that we're doing slightly different now than the first installation. The other thing I can point out is like we have the VIP on this one. So VIP on that end, this engine, the mounting bracket picks up two of the manifold bolts there, and then it has a bolt to hold the back of the servo motor. Keep this out of the throttle, of course, and that goes into the airplane. The this block, if you're doing this on your own, might need a little bit of machining in the front here because it's used on the other engines too. But very simple. Then it goes across, and this one just uses a big bolt that we tap this and it screws it in. So you're gonna have to hold the angle of this with a little pry bar or something when you tighten this, and put a little blue Loctite in there, because you want that bar to pass right across the middle here. And you can see my dimple back there. After it's all said and done, and you have power and you can move the servo back and forth, you set this halfway, and then you get a 5/16 drill and you dimple the rod back there, and that's where the push rod sits. And once you get the dimple into the rod, then you take an 1/8" drill and just make it slightly deeper after you drill it with the 5/16. And then the rod sits in that, the point of the rod for the propeller. You can see that here. Right there, sits in that. All right. Very good. And then we'll do a little walk around tomorrow, I think, with the cowling and everything on it. Like I said, I flew it today a few times, went up to altitude, but no cowling so far. And it's performing really, really well. Nice little airplane. All right, we did a little video last night of this nice airplane without the cowling. We did the cowling today. Turned out nice. We didn't use the existing holes here because it was just some beautiful nut plates here. They weren't rib nuts. They were just really nice nut plates with irregular, solid rivets holding them in place. So you don't take the cowling on the bottom off as often, but we did put just a couple of hinge pins for the top. So we just pull the pins and off the top goes for inspection to make that easy. Put our little hole in here that we like for pulling the cowling to get the hinges in, and also for the hot air to have a place to escape. We got louvers on the side where the turbo is. We want to get rid of as much heat as possible. A lot of heat from this turbocharger. And then same here, elongated this for two reasons: to get the cowling on and off, and also more exit for the hot turbocharger, along with the holes right here. And that of course comes outside of the radiator, which is the point of that. And then the heat doesn't get into the for the cooling of the radiator. So we have that separate. We do have our smiley face up front, and that's to cool the gearbox, and also just to get cool air in and about the cowling inside here, because we do have a lot of electrical connections and plastic intake covers and things like that. So we do want to circulate as much air in and out of this cowling as we can. On this side, we riveted in our NACA. In fact, we just stopped it short here this time, and we used aluminum from there back. We built a little box, and then we have the seal up against the core, and we bent it 90 degrees and riveted it to the cowling. We did have a little cutout back in there too. It's hard to say, but we did, because we have a piano hinge here, so we had to have our little bulkhead piece back here clear the piano hinge. But it all worked out nice. We cut away the lip here on the top. All right, that just gets clearance, so that when the cowling is on, it has just a tiny bit of clearance, and that just stays up in there by itself. And then a piece of hinge here. A few notes here. We finished up, and you'll see at the end of this video that we did change a few things. We changed the way the air enters the radiator. We changed the fuel system and all that, because it wasn't as reliable as we thought. It was actually fluctuating. So we're going to cover that towards the end of the video. Here's just some pictures of the finished installation up to that point, and the customer getting ready to fly it home to somewhere up in Indiana, I believe. Here's the intercooler installation with the baffle seal to seal that. And here's the new fuel pump that we installed, to remove the stuff on the header tank and put in the Viking mini header tank, and our filters, in order to make it reliable and have a nice steady fuel pressure with no fluctuations, and the high current draw that the other system was using. We're down to like a couple of amps per pump here instead of 7 or 8 amps. So far better fuel system. You can see in front of it we put a terminal strip for all the wiring, and then up above there you see we put the check valve assembly at the top of this video, and we use the bottom of the heater as a support for the hose for that. So all in all, a more robust and reliable system. We used the return lines that he had put in as vent lines for the header tank, and if you look at the side of the header tank, you see we welded on side bungs instead of having the top and bottom bungs, in order to be able to install the tank without it making any holes in the floor or anything like that. So that's the fuel system is in the airplane now, and that's the fuel system we flew all the testing with after we discovered that the other one was not reliable. All complete with the louvers and opening in the cowling and the opening for the gearbox in the front. Nice inlet duct for the intercooler, and all around just a pretty airplane, a sleek cowling. And then customer is ready to do the first flight, which for him was get an airplane and fly all the way home to Indiana, even in the night and through a whole bunch of weather and stuff like that. So we all have different comfort levels and what we want to do on our first flight, but got home safe, and the airplane is now at its destination. And here's just a little more on the things that we changed after, having already done the work. Put a little valve there to be sure that the left tank didn't burn more fuel than the right. Here's the check valve assembly. And we tapered the radiator shroud and put some nice new leading, instead of that bar you saw across, nice new leading edge pieces that we'll have available for anyone for the air to go into the radiator. And then customer flying home, a little bit of weather, stopped a couple of places for 93 octane car gas, and all in all, a very successful installation.